Discover the surprising truth. A saloon girl's kindness transformed a cowboy's life and destiny. Dust swirled around Jake Thompson as he leaned against the wooden railing of the Silver Creek Saloon, the warmth of the setting sun casting his shadow long and heavy. The town was alive with laughter and raucous cheers, but all he felt was the suffocating weight of his family's tarnished legacy. Like a noose tightening around him, the whispers of failure trailed his every step. A Thompson, they said, destined for nothing but mediocrity, he thought, a sharp pang of desperation twisting inside him. There, nestled in the corners of his mind, festered dreams of inventions and possibilities stifled by the expectations of rugged masculinity that bound him like leather straps. Then she appeared, Clara. Her laughter sliced through the thick haze of smoke, shimmering like light breaking through a storm cloud. A saloon girl, yes, but in her eyes he found a reflection of potential obscured beneath layers of shame and hardship. He told himself it was madness, a momentary distraction from the relentless whispers urging him to conform. But even in the flickering candlelight, where shadows danced around the poker table and men clinked glasses with cheap whiskey, Clara's kindness glowed. "You're more than just a cowboy, Jake," she said, her voice soft yet insistent. "You could change things." His heart waged a quiet war with his mind. The men of Silver Creek expected him to reject the frivolities of hope, to maintain the stoic silence they admired. Each encouraging word from Clara felt like a rebellion against the town's judgment, a dangerous game that could cost him his already tenuous respect among the rugged drunks and laborers. But with every encounter, her presence sparked a flicker of rebellion against the expectations that entangled him. Yet an unease coiled tight like barbed wire around his heart. Could he really break free? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension thickened around them, palpable as Clara became a target of scorn, brutal remarks hurled like stones by the men whose respect Jake feared to lose. Each time their eyes turned to him, laden with accusation, he felt the walls closing in. "Stand by her and you'll be nothing," the whispers echoed in his mind. The realization struck like a jagged rock. Supporting Clara meant confronting the mob mentality of Silver Creek, risking everything. The dread of abandoning her and squandering the talent she believed existed clawed at his insides, tearing him further apart. He envisioned the invention that still flickered in the depths of his thoughts, a wind-harnessing contraption for struggling ranchers in need. It could elevate them all, lift Clara from her burdens, and perhaps give him the standing he so desperately sought. But at what cost? As the specter of success loomed ever closer, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Could he keep her close with one hand while climbing towards the shimmering horizon of acceptance with the other? Jake stood at the precipice, grappling with an unbearable choice. Forge ahead to fulfill his aspirations, or remain anchored by loyalty to the only soul brightening his dim world? His pulse quickened, drowning his rationality in a rush of anguish and uncertainty, leaving him on the brink of a decision that could redefine his life entirely. The threads of ambition and devotion twined tightly around his heart, with no clear path visible through the dust of Silver Creek. As the setting sun cast the last warm rays into the unforgiving night, the question loomed bigger than life itself. Would he choose the acceptance he craved, or the love that had dared to believe in him first? Jake's mind raced, grappling with the urgency of his choice. Clara's unwavering belief in him stood in stark contrast to the hollering men who scorned her and, by extension, him. The clamor of the saloon faded, transforming into a haunting echo as he envisioned his future. A life lived in the shadow of other men's expectations, or one where he seized his destiny, driven by passion rather than shame. Each scornful glance from the patrons bore into him, like branded images seared into his conscience. He felt the suffocating silence of the saloon around him, broken only by the laughter of a few rowdy men in the corner, their merriment filling the void of his self-doubt. But Clara's words ignited something deep within him, bringing forth thoughts of a life fully embraced. Would he choose mediocrity, clinging to the familiar bitterness of shame, or would he reach for the courage to claim his worth? That night he found himself wandering the streets of Silver Creek. The moonlight painted familiar paths with hues of silver, reflecting off the dusty windows of shops that spoke of better days gone by. He suddenly stopped, feeling the heat of desperation clawing at him, his breath coming in sharp bursts. "You're a Thompson," he reminded himself. "You were born into this." But as he stared into the night, the constraints of his identity felt less tethered and more like chains. The invention he dreamed of lingered in the back of his mind, a beacon of hope he felt unworthy to pursue. What if he faltered? What if his invention failed to take root? The thought stole his breath, leaving him with a singular choice: to risk failure and redefine his existence, or resign himself to the grinding monotony of a life destined to be forgotten. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Jake forced himself to engage with his surroundings, to interact with cattle ranchers who struggled under the weight of their hard-earned lives. He observed their daily battles, learning their troubles and their resilience. In their stories, he found reflections of his own internal struggle, the longing for acknowledgement, the need for validation, and the sometimes crushing weight of familial expectation. Clara became his constant companion in thought, her kindness a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. With each interaction, her spirit encouraged him to vision beyond the dust and despair of Silver Creek. He began sketching designs at night, each line on the paper a promise to himself, a symbol of unyielding ambition against the relentless tide of social expectation. But as his designs took shape, so too did the stakes. Every sketch came with the unresolved tension of revealing his true self to a world that might not accept him. The thought gnawed at him, each night feeding a growing shadow of doubt. With the townsfolk watching, murmurs of a crazy invention circulating around, Jake felt his dream teetering on the edge of disaster. It was then that a confrontation surged through him, raw and unrefined. He felt compelled to seek out Clara, to confide in her the fierce battle between his ambitions and the quiet urging to turn back. As he pushed open the saloon doors, the raucous environment swelled again around him, laughter echoing, cards shuffling, and the occasional clink of glass. Clara caught his eye from across the room, a smile blooming on her lips. In that moment, Jake knew he needed to decide: either step back into the shadows, or fight for the light she believed he could harness. His heart beat fiercely in his chest. The time had come to face not only his fears, but to also confront the townsfolk's judgment that loomed like a storm cloud over Silver Creek. Turning toward Clara, Jake allowed a resolute determination to wash over him. The gentle flicker of confidence that she ignited within him was fierce, and he was ready to grasp it. Now he just had to summon the nerve to share his vision with her. Would her faith in him provide the strength he needed to confront their shared reality in the town? As she approached, the flickering saloon lights catching the hint of anxiety mirrored in his eyes, he took a breath, feeling for the first time an urge not just to speak, but to shout his truth into the world. What would Clara say when she learned the extent of his vision? Would she embrace it, or would fear extinguish the light he'd begun to nurture? The next chapter of his life teetering on her reaction, the ground beneath him shifting as he took a step forward. Clara's footsteps approached, the rhythmic sound almost drowning out the cacophony of the saloon. Jake's heart pounded, a blend of anticipation and trepidation coursing through him. This was the moment. He could feel the potential energy crackle in the air, heavy with his unspoken words. "Jake," Clara greeted, her voice warm and inviting, cutting through his whirlwind of thoughts. "You look like you've been wrestling with a bear. What's going on in that mind of yours?" Her casual inquiry felt like a gentle prod, urging him to reveal the tumult within. Jake hesitated, the weight of his aspirations pressing down on him. He had sketched countless designs and turned them over in his mind, each one steeped in the possibility of transformation. Yet here he stood, paralyzed by fear and the crippling doubt that had defined his life. The memory of judgmental eyes and disparaging laughter lurked at the edges of his mind, ready to smother his light. I'm working on something," he finally confessed, his voice barely above a whisper as he searched Clara's expression for any hint of rejection. "Something great, I hope," she replied, a playful glint in her eyes, but a seriousness lingered beneath her playful tone. "You know I believe in you, Jake." The conviction in her voice stirred something deep inside him, a flicker of the courage he needed to move forward. "It's an invention, something to help the ranchers with their cattle. I've been sketching ideas and—" he faltered, the fear of failure suddenly crashing down around him, a tidal wave threatening to drown his growing ambitions. "But what if it doesn't work?" he blurted, frustration bubbling up. "What if the townsfolk laugh at me? What if I waste my time?" "Jake," Clara interjected firmly, "what if it does work? What if it's just what Silver Creek needs? You're smarter than any of those men in here." Her unwavering belief radiated around him, illuminating the shadows of his doubt. With each word, the chains of expectation that had wrapped around him began to loosen. "What if they think I'm still just a Thompson, meant for dusty cattle trails and not for dreaming?" he mused, his voice quiet but resolute. "The thing about dreams is they require bravery," Clara replied, stepping closer, the distance between them now charged with palpable energy. "You can take the easy road, which may lead to regret, or pursue this vision. Maybe you'll fail, but what you learn from it might be even better than success." For the first time, the thought of failure didn't feel like an end. It felt like a path to discovery. He took a deep breath, glancing around the room, filled with revelers ignorant of the process culminated in the desperation of their drudgery. A realization struck him. This was his life to shape, his vision to push forward. He owed it to himself to try. "Would you help me?" he asked, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the noise of uncertainty. "I need someone to believe this could work, someone who understands." Clara smiled, a soft yet powerful glimmer in her gaze. "Of course, let's figure it out together. You sketch it out, and I'll see how I can help spread the word." The exchange ignited a rush of enthusiasm within him. Clara would stand by him, urging him to embrace the adventure. But a weight still lingered in his chest. As he prepared to share his sketches, a new fear crept into his mind, a fear of opening the door to judgment, to vulnerability. As Clara studied his sketches, Jake's heart raced. He would face his fellow townspeople and reveal his invention, but there were deeper implications at play. Failure could mean not just ridicule, but the further entrenchment of their shared expectations, a confirmation of the limits he had long fought against. He clenched his fists, feeling the urgency of the moment spiral around him. Would he find the strength to face them? Was he, at this very moment, on the precipice of his own greatness, ready to confront what had stunted his growth for years? As Clara looked up, her eyes glimmering with excitement, Jake took a breath, ready to leap into a new reality. A reality where his worth wasn't measured by others, but defined by his own ambition. The question lingering now was whether he could truly break free from the chains of his past in a town that had long dictated his identity. Would this be the dawn of his reclamation or the beginning of his unraveling? Jake's mind raced as Clara scrutinized his sketches. The room around them was filled with the clinking of glasses and jovial laughter, yet within him lay the storm of doubts brewed over years of quiet compliance. This moment, fragile and electric, mirrored the arcs of his hand-drawn designs. The contours of hope intersected with the jagged angles of fear. "Okay, let's start with what you have here," Clara said, tracing a finger over the rough drafts. "What's the main idea behind this?" He faltered momentarily, the words tumbling out in a rush as he attempted to articulate his vision. "It's a sorting device for cattle, fast and efficient. Ranchers waste too much time on basic tasks. This could change everything for them." As he spoke, a new fervor ignited within him, awakening an instinct to power through even the darkest recesses of his mind. He could envision the ranchers embracing the innovation, their skepticism giving way to appreciation. "I like it," Clara replied, her enthusiasm evident. "But have you thought about testing it? Maybe build a prototype?" The idea of a prototype sent a jolt of exhilaration through him, swiftly followed by biting anxiety. "I've never built anything like that. It's one thing to draw it out, another to make it real." Could he really pull it off? The nagging voice of doubt returned, telling him of the potential for failure, of shamed retreats. "Jake," Clara said, snapping him back to the present, "you know what's scarier than risking failure? Never trying in the first place." Her words cut through layers of hesitation, forcing him to confront the truth he kept hidden. He had allowed fear to clutch his dreams for too long, letting it dictate his choices. "What if I fail?" he countered, trying to maintain composure. "What if you don't?" Clara leaned closer, her gaze steady. "No one's journey is without setbacks. It's how you learn, how you grow. It's not about the outcome. It's about the experience, the fight." She handed him one of the sketches, an anchor amidst the swirling tide of uncertainty. There was a gentleness in her demeanor, one that urged him to consider not just what he stood to lose, but what he could gain. A deeper understanding of himself, a community that might rally behind him. As the prospect of testing his invention solidified in his mind, Jake felt the shackles of doubt loosening. There was a tremor of resolve sparking within, a firm decision to move forward, propelled by the belief that perhaps he was more than just a Thompson cursed to tread the monotony of his existence. "Okay," he breathed, his voice steadying. "Let's find out what it takes to build a prototype. I'll need materials, tools, but I'll figure it out." Clara's smile widened, igniting a flicker of excitement between them. "That's the spirit. I'll help gather what you need. We can present it to the ranchers in a few weeks. It will give you time to prepare." Jake's heart soared, a newfound determination fueling his ambition. As he outlined the steps they would take together, a vigorous swell of hope flooded him. But just as exhilaration began to drown out his anxiety, a shadow of worry flickered at the edges of his mind. What would happen if the prototype failed? Would he give everyone another reason to dismiss him? The questions gnawed at him, a haunting echo of his insecurity. He had stepped into uncharted territory, but this was his opportunity, a chance to prove to himself and to others that he was capable. Yet deep down, he sensed the cautionary tale of his past looming like a storm cloud as he clung to the possibility of triumph. His deep-rooted vulnerabilities battled with visions of success, and in those raw moments of preparation and hope, it was unclear which would emerge victorious. As they came up with a plan, Jake felt the weight of expectation settle over him, both exhilarating and terrifying. There was no turning back now. The moment he would step into the light of vulnerability drew near, leaving him in a precarious dance with his ambitions. The conclusions he would draw from his impending endeavor were destined to reshape his soul. Would he rise to the challenge, or would fear re-emerge to render him silent once more? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, an impending confrontation with both the town and himself waiting to be unveiled. Days turned into a whirlwind of restless activity and sleepless nights. The sketches that once filled Jake's notebook began to morph into physical blueprints, chaotic yet brimming with potential. The moment Clara agreed to help was a turning point. Together they scoured local stores for materials, tinkering with ideas as they dug through hardware supplies, their conversations bouncing from the mechanics of the device to the allure of the ranching life. Every time they gathered around her table, cluttered with wood strips, metal fasteners, and tools, Jake felt a pulse of excitement mingle with anxiety. He was acutely aware of an internal struggle. His vivid imagination soared, painting pictures of success, while an insidious whisper in his mind warned him of impending failure. Could he really convert his sketches into something tangible? What if Clara was right, and in the act of creation he found something more than just an invention? As he tried to transition from the ideation phase to actual creation, the challenge felt monumental. Jake encountered small setbacks, a misaligned piece, a mechanical failure, each punctuated by his rising doubts. "What if I can't get past this?" he would say aloud, more often than not in the company of Clara, who never wavered in her encouragement. She would listen patiently, then guide him back to the task at hand. "You're doing great, Jake. Every mistake is a step forward," she reassured him one afternoon. "You'll figure it out. Just give it time." It was in those moments that Jake began to crack open a door he had subconsciously sealed shut throughout his life. With every error, he started to unearth a forgotten part of himself, the determination to persist, to innovate, and to teach himself new skills. Working alongside Clara not only tested his technical abilities, but also pushed him into a profound introspection. Each challenge became less daunting when he viewed it as an opportunity for discovery. Jake's fascination with the prototype grew. He poured himself into research, studying cattle handling systems, the intricacies of mechanical engineering, and the psychology behind effective design. He discovered he had a knack for problem solving and an innate capacity to visualize solutions that others struggled to see. Clara saw this transformation, often fostering discussions that spurred his insights. "What's your vision for the end product?" she prompted one evening as they worked late into the twilight, the last remnants of sunlight filtering through the windows. "I want it to be something they can't overlook," he said, leaning over the table filled with parts, "something that catches their eye and makes their lives easier." The clarity in his voice surprised even him, reinforcing that what lay before him was more than just an invention. It was a reflection of his aspirations. But doubt still loomed dangerously close, a specter manifesting in the shadows of late-night work sessions. The looming presentation felt like an impending storm he could neither predict nor avoid. He wrestled with the consequences of failure, imagining the ranchers' dismissive faces if the prototype didn't work. It was a personal and professional crucible. "Jake, you are underestimating yourself," Clara said one afternoon, noticing the weight of apprehension bearing down on him. You're about to present them with something they didn't even know they needed. No matter what happens, your journey here is valuable. Trust that. Trust. The word resonated in Jake's soul like a slow drumbeat, yet uncertainty remained. He needed to confront this fear head-on, to step into that forthcoming confrontation, not only with the ranchers, but with the shattered fragments of himself he feared would resurface. The day of the demonstration loomed, vibrant and terrifying. Jake found himself standing on the precipice of a breakthrough and the possibility of defeat. What if they really don't see the value? He questioned, a tension tightening within him. That's a risk, Clara said, her unwavering gaze meeting his. But isn't it worth taking? This was more than about the rancher's approval. It was about affirmation of his capabilities. As he stood on that brink, something shifted within him, a fortified spark igniting. The distilling moment arrived when the night finally slipped away, breaking into dawn. He was ready to meet his crossroads, poised between realization and fear. The questions that haunted him echoed louder now, inviting answers he wasn't sure he could stomach facing. The stakes had never been higher. What would he unearth as he faced the ranchers? Would they welcome his endeavor, or would Jake find himself wrestling with the weight of their indifference in the light of day? The sun crested the horizon, casting a golden hue across the makeshift workshop where Jake and Clara had spent countless hours. The tables were still cluttered with parts and tools, but somehow their chaotic arrangement felt like a testament to progress rather than a symbol of disorder. Jake stood there, heart racing, each beat echoing the weight of expectation. His prototype, a tangible manifestation of his fervor and sleepless nights, waited quietly under a dust cover. Clara entered, her presence as steady as the morning sun. "You ready for this?" she asked, fixing her eyes on his, searching for the flicker of confidence that had begun to spark within him. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied, though the words felt heavy on his tongue. He took a deep breath, drawing in courage alongside the fresh air. Each inhale whispered promises of potential, yet with every exhale came the sting of doubt, a familiar dance of anticipation and fear. The demonstration was scheduled for the end of the week, and time felt both like a fierce enemy and a patient friend. Every day they met pushed him closer to that precipice, a duality of exhilaration and trepidation weaving through his mind. Jake channeled his emotions into the prototype, sweating over refinements, hoping to attune it to a blend of innovation and necessity. "Think of it like storytelling," Clara suggested one evening, handing him a wrench as he struggled with a stubborn gear. "What story does your device tell? What's its purpose?" As Jake tightened the last bolt, the metaphor resonated more profoundly than he realized. In his efforts, he began sculpting a narrative, not just for the ranchers, but for himself. This device symbolized his belief in the unseen opportunities, the hidden value in innovation that could reshape lives. He found himself pondering the ranchers as individuals. Each of them accounted for generations of wisdom and experience. What if they were merely waiting for someone to unlock a different approach? Jake's desire to prove himself morphed into a deeper ambition, to add value to their long-standing traditions. The weight of glory and urgency now fueled him as the presentation loomed closer. By the time Thursday evening arrived, the weight of his undertaking felt insurmountable. Clara stood by him, her unwavering belief like an anchor in a stormy sea. "You have something special here," she told him, adjusting a component on the prototype. "Just show them your passion." Yet Jake's stomach twisted into knots as the day of the demonstration approached. Just hours before stepping into the room full of the ranchers, he wrestled with the specter of what-ifs. His palms were damp and his throat felt tight. Did he truly merit the trust Clara placed in him? Could he reveal the truth he had unearthed within himself? "No more doubting," he said to his reflection in a nearby window. "You have something to share." With newfound determination, he stepped out, determination surging through his veins, combating every vestige of fear that clung to him. The ranchers arrived, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. Jake's heart pounded with each second that passed. His mind replayed Clara's words, "Your journey is valuable." As he introduced the prototype, he fought through an initial stutter, feeling the weight of their eyes on him. When he unveiled the device, a palpable shift in the atmosphere occurred. They leaned in, curiosity piqued, their expressions shifting under the spell of his words. However, as he demonstrated its functions, the air thickened with silence. Each technical glitch that flared up felt magnified, the shadow of failure creeping back in. An uneasy tension seized the room, palpable and suffocating. Jake's mind raced. Had he misjudged their need? Were they about to walk away from this moment, leaving him grappling with the echoes of rejection? Then something clicked in him, a defiance burning bright. "Mistakes are a part of the process," he said, his voice steadier now, slicing through the doubt that the crowd might feel. "If I can learn from these failures, so can all of us."
What I hope to share today isn't just a prototype, it's an invitation to explore our capabilities. The ranchers exchanged glances, uncertainty mingling with intrigue. Jake sensed the tides shifting. He had begun to not only present his invention, but engage them in a meaningful dialogue about innovation, possibility, and the future. But just as the first glimmer of connection began to shine, a rustling among the ranchers caught his eye. Would they embrace his vision, or would he find himself confronting their skepticism head-on? As he awaited their response, the climax of his journey churned within him. This was it, both terrifying and exhilarating. The moment that could redefine everything he believed about himself had arrived. Yet uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud overhead. How would they respond after everything he had laid bare? The moment hung heavy in the air, the ranchers' murmurs weaving together a tapestry of skepticism and intrigue. Jake's heart thudded in his chest, a relentless drumbeat amplifying the silence that enveloped him like a suffocating blanket. Their faces were inscrutable, some masked disbelief, while others revealed hints of curiosity or concern. Had he done enough to connect his vision to their reality? "Tell us more about its applications," one of the ranchers finally broke the stillness, a burly man with a weathered face etched by years under the sun. His voice cut through Jake's internal chaos, pulling him back to the moment. Jake took a step forward, finding strength in the challenge. This isn't merely a product, it's designed to enhance efficiency. Picture yourself using this device. It transforms conventional methods, saves you time, and increases yields. What if your harvest was not only better, but easier to manage? As he spoke, he could see the ranchers start to visualize the possibilities. Their brows unfurled, and he leaned into that momentum, excitedly detailing every facet of the prototype. Yet a shadow loomed. Self-doubt flickered at the edges of his thoughts. Could he truly change their perceptions with mere words, or would they ultimately resist? Just then, an old rancher with bright blue eyes and stooped shoulders frowned deeply. "And what happens when the technology fails, boy?" he challenged, crossing his arms. "We've survived without it for generations. What makes you think we should trust some contraption over hard-earned experience?" Jake's chest tightened. He was confronting the elephant in the room. The old man's skepticism wasn't just a barrier. It was an opportunity to confront the very fear that had plagued him throughout this journey.
He squared his shoulders, his heart racing with renewed determination. "Failure," he began, choosing his words carefully, "is not a dead end. I've learned more from each mistake than from each success. We adapt, we improvise. Your ancestors thrived by embracing change, just as we must now." A moment of silence followed his words, and Jake caught the eyes of those around him, reading their reactions. He could feel the shift, a subtle tension easing as he spoke not just about his prototype, but about a mindset that resonated with the rancher's own history. Then one woman piped up from the back, her voice tinged with a quiet enthusiasm. "What if your device could work in harmony with our methods? That would be something to consider." Encouraged, Jake leaned into her words. "Exactly. It's not about replacing tradition. It's about enhancing what you already know. This device can be the key to merging the old with the new, unlocking potential without sacrificing your roots." As he elaborated, the ranchers began nodding, the conversation alive in a way that felt invigorating, a pulse of dialogue forming that he hadn't anticipated. Still, the old rancher's eyes scrutinized him, unyielding. "And what will you do when you face failure yourself? Will you run back to your drawing board, or will you stand and justify your vision?" The question struck deep, a challenge not only to his prototype, but to his very identity. An evening spent confronting adversities in the workshop echoed in his mind. His late nights working through errors, his habitual self-doubt. The weight of the old rancher's scrutiny made Jake face the reality that his journey wasn't merely about innovative ideas. It was about embracing failures with humility and resilience. "I will stand," Jake proclaimed, his voice fierce with conviction. "I've already faced my failures, and I'm here because I believe there's more to learn. This isn't just about this device. It's about collaboration, about education, about each of us growing together." Jake felt transformation within the room, the atmosphere charged with hope and anticipation. Yet, even as he basked in the connection he had forged, he sensed an undercurrent of unresolved tension still hovering, as if the ranchers were poised on a precipice, waiting for an unmistakable signal from him. Would they take the leap into this new territory he proposed, or would they retreat into the comfort of the familiar? The old rancher's indecipherable expression weighed on him, signaling that it wasn't just the invention at stake. This was about changing hearts and minds. As he met the old man's gaze, the potential for a revelation felt imminent, a bridge waiting to be built. Whatever the outcome, Jake sensed that his leap into the unknown, filled with doubt yet adorned with determination, was about to lead him into uncharted territory. Could he begin to shift their perspectives, and in doing so, transform his own journey from doubter to innovator? The question loomed, the next challenge fathoming just beyond that horizon. Jake stood in the silence that followed, the palpable tension of the rancher's unanswered stares weighing heavily upon him.
The old rancher's scrutiny felt like an anchor, yet Jake knew he couldn't allow himself to drift from this moment of potential change. Each pair of eyes around him was a pane of glass, fragile yet capable of reflecting new light with the right message. What will you do when you face failure? Jake had answered that question with a fervor that surprised even himself. Yet hidden beneath his bravado was a nagging fear, a feeling that the very next question could collapse the bridge he was trying to build. This wasn't merely about the technology, it was also about the trust that he needed to foster, a trust that felt as elusive as the evening breeze that whispered through the barn doors. Determined to continue the dialogue, Jake took a breath, consciously striving to swallow the tightness in his throat. "Do any of you remember the drought 3 years ago?" He glanced around, picking out nods and murmurs of agreement. For many, it wasn't just about lost crops, it was survival. What if this device had been able to help you identify areas of the field that needed attention before it was too late? Imagine not waiting for the rain, but leveraging data to work alongside nature, not just endure it. As he painted images of potential success, he saw glimmers of hope in their eyes. The old rancher remained stoic, but a flicker of interest in his gaze suggested something was shifting beneath the surface of his resolute demeanor. Jake could only hope that he was beginning to break through the barriers built by years of deep-seated skepticism. Technology hasn't just failed us, it's provided us with options, tools for survival. I acknowledge that mistakes can happen, he continued, keeping his voice steady. But what's more dangerous, using a tool that might fail us, or standing still in fear while the world around us evolves? A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was subtle, but he could sense the change, resistance melting away like frost under the sun's warm rays. One of the younger ranchers leaned forward, eyes brightening. "I've always been curious. Is there a chance to integrate real-time monitoring into livestock management? That's something I've struggled with." Jake seized the moment, feeling the energy shift. "Exactly. We can tailor the technology to meet your specific needs. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Picture having the freedom to make informed decisions at any moment, not just relying on memory or old practices." Encouraged by this interaction, he turned to the old rancher again, feeling the challenge of their earlier connection still looming. "Sir, I understand that you've put years of faith into what you know, but I'm not asking you to abandon those values. I'm suggesting a partnership where tradition and innovation coexist." For the first time, the old rancher uncrossed his arms, revealing a softening posture. His brows furrowed in thought, and Jake sensed he was grappling not just with the presentation of his idea, but with an inner conflict, fear of change clashing with the possibilities Jake offered. Yet the room was still fraught with anticipation, and one unspoken question lingered in the air. How could he prove this was viable beneath the weight of their histories? "Why don't we do a trial run?" Jake proposed, his heart racing at the boldness of the idea. "I can demonstrate the device with a few of your fields. You'll see firsthand what it can offer. If it fails, you have every right to dismiss me and my invention. But if it succeeds—" The ranchers weighed the proposal, exchanging cautious glances. The air hung thick with uncertainty as the old rancher carefully scrutinized Jake. "All right, but I'm not a patient man," he replied, a hint of challenge in his voice. "You'll need to prove not just the device, but that you grasp our way of life. If you falter, I can promise you may have more than skeptics to answer to." Jake nodded, feeling the magnitude of the challenge before him. They were entrusting him with their labor, their traditions, their lives. It was a leap that both excited and terrified him. But something ignited within him, vision evolving into purpose, a chance to stand firm amidst the uncertainty. "Then let's begin," he said, his voice ringing with resolve. As the ranchers began conversating amongst themselves, a strange sense of both relief and trepidation washed over Jake. He had crossed a line, but with it came the realization that this was only the beginning. What truths and fears would he confront next in this uncharted partnership? And would he have what it took to rise to the occasion every step of the way? The morning sun poured through the barn's open doors, bathing the wooden beams in golden light. Jake felt its warmth as he stood in front of the ranchers, grappling with the weight of their trust, a commodity he knew he had to earn, not simply acquire. He could hear the soft murmurs growing into a buzz as they debated his proposal. It struck him then this was a delicate dance. Jake paced slowly, his footsteps matching the rhythm of his racing thoughts. How could he prove his worth in this testing ground? The ranchers had lived lives cracked open by hardship, and he would have to tread carefully. He needed not just evidence of success, but a connection to their very spirit, their sweat-soaked legacy. A question nagged at him. What if he failed? The thought brought him to a halt, hands gripping the edge of a nearby fence post. Dust stirred around his feet. Disappointment, doubt, or worse, despair, was a legacy too costly for these ranchers to bear. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself that failure was part of the journey. Perhaps this very fear could be a teacher. With purpose, Jake returned his focus to the ranchers, intent on steering the conversation toward a practical demonstration.
"How about we schedule the first field test for next week?" he suggested, steadier now. "It'll give you a chance to see the technology in action and provide feedback." The old rancher inclined his head slightly, still calculating. Jake could see the internal struggle in his eyes, and it only fueled Jake's determination to bridge this gap. This wasn't merely a trial run, it was a pledge of faith. "If we can show how this works, it could transform your operations, make them not just bearable, but profitable," Jake continued. "Profit is good," the old rancher replied, "but it's the trust that needs nurturing first. You roam in here with your shiny gadgets, but do you understand what it means to bleed and sweat?" Jake's chest tightened, a flicker of anger mixed with understanding igniting within him. "No, I don't farm in blood and dust, but I know what it is to be grounded in passion." The sharpness of his words surprised him. "I have watched my family lose everything due to inaction. All I'm offering is a chance, an opportunity to harness not just the rain, but to predict it. You're not just surviving, you could be thriving." "Profit is good," the old rancher replied, "but it's the trust that needs nurturing first. You roam in here with your shiny gadgets, but do you understand what it means to bleed and sweat?" Jake's chest tightened, a flicker of anger mixed with understanding igniting within him. "No, I don't farm in blood and dust, but I know what it is to be grounded in passion." The sharpness of his words surprised him. "I have watched my family lose everything due to inaction. All I'm offering is a chance, an opportunity to harness not just the rain, but to predict it. You're not just surviving, you could be thriving." Silence engulfed the barn momentarily, the air thick with tension as his words lingered. The faces around him shifted, eyes narrowing, caught in the balance of skepticism and something deeper, curiosity perhaps. Jake could sense the old rancher was still considering every angle. It was then he realized this moment was more than just about technology. It was about recalibrating expectations. "You've been doing it alone for too long," he said, a newfound softness taking over his tone. "But together we can navigate these waters." The shift was palpable as several ranchers exchanged looks. The old rancher's skeptical facade began to show cracks, and Jake understood he had touched on something vital. But with that understanding also came the fear of the potential consequences of failure. Days turned into a slow crawl as Jake prepared for the next week. He was consumed by self-questioning, poring over designs and algorithms, yet equally aware of his growing affinity for the rancher's way of life. They were resilient, yet tethered to the past. He sought to be their bridge into a future that felt overwhelmingly bright, but fraught with shadows of doubt. The evenings were spent reconciling his apprehensions with pep talks in the mirror, imagining the faces that would respond to each failure. Yet the more he practiced, the clearer it became that he was transforming not just the methods, but himself. He felt a resolution solidify inside him as he prepared for the trial. Jake realized this journey would test more than his technical knowledge. It would confront his resilience, professionalism, and moral compass head on. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he received a phone call. A rancher whose curiosity was piqued by his words wanted to meet. The prospect fluttered in his stomach like a flock of startled birds.
What new challenges lay ahead in this uncharted partnership? An urgent sense of purpose washed over him. He wasn't just attempting to sell a tool. He was taking the first steps into a world steeped in history and hard lessons. Would he embody the change he wanted to see, or would he be cast aside when the stakes rose? Jake stood before his prototype, heart racing and mind buzzing as the day of the trial arrived. The barn, now a centerpiece of anticipation, buzzed with the aura of inquiry and uncertainty. It had been a week filled with restless nights, and the weight of all his hopes, insecurities, and dreams rested upon his shoulders like a heavy yoke. Clara's unwavering support had guided him through this whirlwind of preparation, but facing the ranchers was different. This was the culmination of everything he had envisioned, a test not just of his invention, but of his ability to forge a new identity in a town filled with legacies. As the ranchers began arriving, the atmosphere shifted, laden with skepticism, yet electrified with curiosity. Each man walked in with an air of tradition, dressed in the weight of generations ingrained in agrarian practices. Jake felt their eyes scrutinizing every move he made, the flicker of doubt still a shadow lingering in the back of his mind. "Let's get started," he said, projecting confidence he was still borrowing. With a final glance at Clara, he threw off the dust cover, revealing his creation. The mechanical device glimmered under the barn's overhead light, a manifestation of hopes and long nights dedicated to overcoming odds. He activated the prototype, the device whirring to life, gears turning in a seamless dance. A stillness gripped the space as ranchers leaned in, their masks of skepticism momentarily lifted. "This," Jake began, "is designed to change how we manage cattle, saving time, reducing labor, and increasing productivity." As he explained how the device functioned, the skepticism slowly began to morph into intrigue. Ranchers listened, observing how the machine sorted and managed the simulated data of cattle movement with efficiency he had conceptualized amid his fears. For every series of nods he received, he felt a rush of validation. Yet the old rancher's stern gaze lingered in his periphery, ready to pounce should anything falter. When it came time for them to test the device in the nearby fields, Jake ushered forward with a newfound sense of purpose. He needed to prove not just the invention's worth, but also his own. The ranchers followed closely, murmuring among themselves, skepticism weaving through ideas of curiosity and practicality. "Jake, you remember what I said about trust?" the old rancher asked, voice steady yet looming. In that moment, Jake sensed how he could not unravel at the seams. He had to absorb all the pressure and rise to the occasion. He turned to the ranchers, each pair of eyes now framing a shared journey. "It's time to embrace the possibility of what this technology can do," he responded, the fierceness in his own voice catching him off guard. "Just as your ancestors embraced change, we should not shield ourselves from innovation." As he strived to implement the device in real time, something remarkable occurred, a shift in the rancher's demeanor. What began as skepticism now held glimmers of interest as they engaged with one another about the advantages of the model and its implications for their practices. The sun hung low in the sky as they worked, shadows stretching across the field like the memories of doubt that had lingered in Jake's mind.
He felt their discussions entwine with acceptance, practicality wading through the hard-earned skepticism that had ruled their lives for generations. "It's important, Jake," one younger rancher finally said, looking Jake square in the eyes, "to ensure the past guides your invention, not negates it." He nodded, understanding that the real triumph was more than just this prototype working flawlessly. It was about embedding their legacies into the innovations he was striving to harness. That evening, as they packed up, laughter and excitement filled the air. For the first time, Jake felt he had arrived, not merely in Silver Creek, but on a path toward reconciliation with both tradition and invention. The old rancher approached him, still serious but softer around the edges. "You've handled yourself well. We may have more to discuss, Jake. You've made a good case," he said, extending a weathered hand. In that moment, Jake felt the tightening grasp of his insecurities start to loosen. The shadows of past failures turned into validating experiences, framed by Clara's unwavering belief and cemented by his pursuit of innovation. This was not a deterrent, but a stepping stone. "Thank you," Jake replied, voice steady, shaking the rancher's hand with newfound confidence. "I look forward to working together." As he glanced to Clara, her eyes sparkled with shared victory, reflecting the pride that blossomed within him. Jake had crossed not just a threshold into their community, but had dismantled the very perception he once held of himself, that he was meant for mediocrity. Days later, as discussions proceeded to flourish and the device evolved, Jake stood firm in his transition. What began as a trembling aspiration transformed into a discovery, a profound acceptance within himself as he demonstrated competence in a field that had once felt foreign. He had conquered the tide of fear, proving to himself and to the ranchers that ambition forged in the crucible of uncertainty could lead to true progress, not merely in technology, but in identity. In the heart of Silver Creek, the sun set gently, a new chapter unfolding, not only for Jake Thompson, but for the community that had watched him emerge from the shadows.
He had accomplished what he once deemed improbable, ignited by Clara's kindness and his own determination to transcend legacy and foster innovation amid tradition. There stood Jake, now not just a Thompson bound by expectation, but an innovator capable of changing the landscape, embracing growth, cultivating acceptance, and nurturing dreams. At last, he truly belonged. Now, if you resonated with Jake's journey and his transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire personal overcoming. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover their potential. Comment your thoughts and theories on Jake's journey and how courage can redefine one's purpose. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Your support matters immensely.